you were expecting to hear about why finance leaders no longer need IT to run ERP reports, you're in the right spot. So without further ado, we're going to kick this off. I am your host for today's session. My name is Marie Weiss. I'm the CEO of Marketing Copilot. I am the host of a podcast called The Hot Seat, which you can get at iTunes and Spotify and YouTube if you're so inclined, where I interview Microsoft partners and software developers about what's new in the industry and what's happening. And today, it is my pleasure to have a killer panel of experts on today about financial reporting. And we're presenting this on behalf of FYIsoft. Really interesting product. We're going to spend some time at the very end and just mention a couple of goodies that Microsoft has for everybody today. But FYIsoft is fairly new to the Microsoft channel last few years, but not new to ERP reporting, and has a really interesting product. And it spawned the discussion that we're going to have today. So we want to give a huge thanks to our sponsor, FYIsoft, for helping us put this panel together. But enough about me. Cynthia, take a minute. Introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Cynthia Preby, and I'm a Microsoft MVP. But first of all, how do you know somebody's an MVP? They let you know, just so you know. But really, the reason I'm an MVP is because of my passion. And I am really, really passionate about looking at the many different ways things work with Business Central, with your organization, with how you operate, and trying to figure out what's the righter way for you. Because there's so many different ways to do things, if you're looking at it and you're frustrated and you're saying this isn't right, i.e. reporting, it might be because you're looking at it the wrong way and you just need to take a different approach and you can get what you need.
Awesome. Stephanie, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. As it says, Stephanie Clark here. I have been in this channel for a really long time, over 20 years, done a ton of projects, and I really specialize in helping my clients look at their business process and make sure that they're using their ERP system as a tool to make that as efficient and as effective as possible. So super glad to talk about this topic. It's one I know we're all passionate about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Carrie.
Thanks, Marie. Well, I will start by saying I have not been in the channel 20 years and I'm not an MVP. However, I think I have a unique background coming from the corporate accounting world, starting as an end user of NAV and Business Central. So even today, I'm integrated with a lot of different accounting departments, working in AP, working as a controller, CFO. So for me, I've really been able to see the impact that Business Central and reporting can have on a company and understand the pain points.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Yeah, I started Powerlift Solutions about a month and a half ago. So I'm doing a mix of kind of accounting / Business Central consulting work. And it seems to be that perfect mix where I can be involved in the day-to-day, but then also see it from that higher level perspective.
You're a good lady to know. All right. I can't wait to jump into this conversation because you all have really unique perspectives on this. So we've got a series of questions that we cooked up and we posed to our panelists today. They're going to be tough ones. There's no easy answer here. But let's talk about what we're seeing right now in the ERP landscape. And even though I would say I'm fairly new to the Microsoft channel, I've only been around for about 10 years. I do a lot of my work in customer engagement with CRM. So I'm not as deep into the weeds on ERP, but I can tell you as a business owner, I understand the importance of reporting, and I understand the importance of having a place to go to give you a sense of comfort about what's actually going on in your business. And I think I bring the business owner's approach to this as well. I think there's 4 things that we want to tackle today that we think are the hottest topics. First of all, reporting sucks. I was going to come right out and say it. Reporting's not easy. And even when I do customer engagement sessions, with their CRM, and we're setting up a new CRM and we're trying to get the marketing dashboard right. And it's like, okay, what kind of reporting do we need to do? And everybody scratches their head. They don't know. Oftentimes things out of the box don't work the way they're supposed to. The second thing, though, and we hope you came to this webinar today because you were intrigued by, and listen, if you're in IT and you're joining the webinar and you're an IT person, this is not meant to be a slight in any way. But I think we can all agree that when IT makes a decision about technology tools and they're the ones, owning it and running it and putting guardrails around it, and then we have to go to IT and ask for reporting, it's not great. The business leaders, probably there's a translation thing that has to happen between what a business leader knows they're trying to do in the business and how IT approaches it. And sometimes that translation doesn't happen. And so we want to take IT out of the hands of reporting because they got way more high value things to do. They got security to deal with. They've got guardrails around AI to start dealing with. Reporting shouldn't be something that they're struggling with. And the finance leaders shouldn't have to go and ask for reporting. So we're going to tackle that problem. Power BI and Power Platforms. What role does it play in this new world of AI and agents? And obviously then AI and Copilot for finance. We're going to tackle a bit of that and talk a little bit about, should we just let people use AI to run reports on data? Is that good information? And this team had a chance to do a pre-call and share some of our thoughts and ideas. And I know we have some very strong opinions about these things. So I want to dive right in. I want to get to our very first question. And I know I'm not the person with my hands on the system building reports, but I can tell you from any business I've ever worked in and any CFO I've ever worked with, ERP reporting is complicated. Why is it so complicated? Stephanie, let's let you lead off the answer to this one.
Yeah, I think it's so complicated because ERP touches every piece of the business. So when that happens, you have to have reporting that touches every piece of the business. What I work with a lot of manufacturing organizations, and what the operations team needs is very different than what the accounting team needs. And so being able to solve for all those problems or all those views makes it super difficult.
Absolutely. Cynthia, I know you said, there's so many ways to tackle this, but doesn't that also create the complexity because there's so many ways to tackle this? What's your thought?
Absolutely. And that complexity is even made worse because we not only have our general ledger, but we have a lot of different sub-ledgers. So when Stephanie was mentioning operational data versus financial data, and they do cross over, but do I need to get the data from a consumption type of entry from the item ledger entries, or am I looking at value entries, which are below the item ledger entries, or should I just go straight to the GL? So when you're talking to a user who's talking to someone in IT, and neither one of them necessarily know or speak the language of the other as much as we try to, it creates a lot of confusion. So I think that's why it's so complex. We have two different groups of people trying to communicate about the same thing, and no one's quite sure how to relay their request.
Yeah, I think that's right. That whole translation piece. Carrie, what are your thoughts?
I will build off of what Stephanie and Cynthia said, but Maria, I actually think of reporting in kind of a different way. So I like to think of the perspective of, I really like reporting because it gives me the chance to take all of the hard work that everyone has done throughout the month and put it into a format, or help paint a picture for management to show where we're at. So I think what can be complex about it, though, is the trust in the reporting. I've seen companies that spend thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours into these really cool dashboards and Power BI reports, only to find that nobody uses them because they just don't trust that the data is right. And maybe it was only, the first time that they looked and something was wrong, but that sticks with them of, oh, I need to be constantly checking the data because it wasn't right this one time. So I think that ties into what Stephanie and Cynthia said of just having trust in where that data is coming from and whether it's right. But I do like to think that, this is our chance to be able to show everything that's happened throughout the month in a way that makes sense to people, but we just need to make sure it's right.
We just got a great comment there from Robert. You must work at my company. I want to just do a call out to everybody on the call. Please put your thoughts, your comments, your questions, everything in the chat. we're monitoring it very closely. And we love to hear your comments and your feedback. I forgot to say that right off the top as far as housekeeping. Just keep the comments coming. But, you know, I understand that very well, what you're saying. I have a joke in our company that Excel spreadsheets are my kryptonite. And that's because I get faced with an Excel spreadsheet. And one, I don't trust that the information's correct. And two, Excel has always irritated me because there's a million ways to slice and dice it. I'm never quite, everybody who does an Excel spreadsheet has their own way of doing it. And there's no consistency. And I think that's the other thing, the reason we want to get reporting under control in a business is to create that consistency and to create something that is giving us trust in what we're looking at. So the next question is, you know, we talked about that ability to speak the same language, share information back and forth between accounting and finance leaders and IT when it comes to reporting. But why is there so much tension? I mean, we've touched on a few things, but Cynthia, why do you think there's so much tension?
I think part of it comes from this concept of somebody or some department owns the system, right? So IT was the one who helped get it in place, so IT owns it. Well, that's not true. The enterprise owns it. Everyone who works in that system owns it. And I think it's also that tension is caused by that confusion or that inability to communicate with each other. If I'm in my IT world, I'm really good with all my acronyms. I know what all those 3 letters mean, right? And I'm in the finance world and I know what my acronyms mean. And now we're both talking with each other, and it's trying to get it down to, again, that basic, I'll just call it English, so that what the request is can be understood by the person that it's being requested of. And it's a team effort. It's not IT owns it, and it's not accounting's data, because accounting put in, did the entry, so accounting doesn't own the GL entries. I think that's a lot of it. And I think the other thing is that accounting and finance, when it comes to an implementation, sometimes feels like they're not thought of, or they're like a second thought. All this time is spent in the warehouse. All this time is spent in manufacturing. All this time is spent with the sales force. And then, oh, by the way, we better check with the people in accounting and make sure the general ledger's right. And that's wrong. Again, it's an enterprise solution. Everyone should have an equal ownership.
And there's a lot of things, and we're going to get to this towards the end in one of our questions about AI. There's a lot of things about AI that I don't love. The one thing I have loved about AI is I've watched organizations implement it is it tends to break down silos, because we want to accomplish a goal, and we need to accomplish a goal based on agentic tools or AI tools that are off that common set of data or a shared sense of what data it's going to look at. And I have found, just in the work I'm doing, that it breaks those silos down, because now I need to know what's going on in the accounting department in order to understand what I'm going to try to attempt to do in marketing, as an example. So Carrie, what do you think? And you're the unicorn here. You sit on both sides of the equation. So what do you think?
Yes, well, I appreciate Cynthia calling attention to the accounting department, sometimes not getting the glory or the attention. But I think everyone, for the most part, knows too, everything flows down to the finance department in some sort of transaction. So if anyone here is in accounting, often the thought is, oh, if it's wrong, accounting will see it, accounting will fix it. But how great would it be to have the information to be able to proactively make sure that things are correct? I think the other thing is that IT does so much. They might be asked to help reconcile a bank account for the first time after an implementation. They might be asked to figure out an API for reporting. There's so many different requests, I think, that come into IT that it's not that they don't want to work with accounting and help accounting, but their time is so limited. And like you said, Marie, in the beginning, how great would it be if they could spend their time on those higher value things, and accounting could be independent of maintaining the reports, figuring out what they need and being able to build them. So I think it's just that IT has so much on their plates that if we could take that one thing off of their plates, how great would that be?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Stephanie, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to double down a bit on that as well. I just think Traditionally, we've had to rely on IT so often to build the reports or get the information that we wanted. And in finance, we feel a little handcuffed, right? We just need to get to the information. We got to get this done. And we all know, my present company included, sometimes we may have a little control issue there. We want to get to what we want. And so it just gets frustrating. And anytime people get frustrated, that just breeds conflict, and it's no fun. Someone made a point, Chris, I love what he said. People can be very protective of specifics, formatting, etc., and change is hard. 100% true on that. Had to give that comment a shout out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the crux of human nature, is change, adapt, being able to adapt, being able to kind of go with the flow. I know sometimes I find that really hard, and I think that's where we're coming from. I think we've all, paid attention to some of the big changes that are going on right now at Microsoft, particularly some of the comments around, well, obviously the one that's, stirred up the channel for a while now about GP versus BC, transitioning off GP, what's getting supported, to the most recent conversations Microsoft has been having in June and July of this year about business applications going away. We don't need business applications. We can just run on a database and use AI agents. And we need to go build more AI agents. And, given what we're seeing, in this big move to Business Central, given all these things we're seeing, what does it mean for reporting? What is happening right now in the channel that, makes products like FYIsoft really interesting? For example, we had Management Reporter when we were using GP. We moved to Business Central. We don't necessarily need Management Reporter anymore. But is what we have right out of the box going to work? So what's changed that means we have to take a new lens on reporting? And what does it mean? Stephanie, you keep the ball rolling here. What do you think?
Sure. I think there's a few things. I mean, obviously we've got the whole AI thing that goes without saying. I think one of the biggest pieces to me is this new era of low code, no code, or click, not code, those kind of things. We're trying to empower the users a little bit more. So it builds on the last question that we just talked about, right? Can we take this a little bit more out of the hands of IT, put it in the hands of the folks who actually know and need the data? I think that's a change that we need to be open to and look at, hey, where can we really take this? I think there's some exciting possibilities out there, and we just might have to look at things a little bit differently.
Cynthia, what do you think?
I'm going to kind of take a different tack to it and just say that in Business Central, if you're talking about coming from GP or any other legacy system, right, or whatever system you're in, but again, my frame of reference is Business Central, is that what has happened is that in the past, when I was working, let's say with Nav, I would have to get custom reports made for customers all the time. And it involved a developer, not even IT, but a developer at the partner. Right. With the structure and the way BC is written and all the exposure that we get to like posted purchase lines and posted sales lines and item ledger entries and value entries in list form and our analysis mode. And when we go into analysis mode, we now have tools that are very similar feeling, pivot tables like we use in Excel. Well, but I could just take it to Excel, but guess what? I can click through when I'm still working in BC. So there's a lot of things that have changed in ERP recently. It's all relative. I mean, we used to say recent was like the last couple of years. Now recent is 2 months. My goodness. The pace has just picked up. But don't forget about so many of the basics. I think I've written or had a developer write one custom report since I've been working in BC, which is how long has been BC since 2018?
Right.
2019?
Right.
So
that's an interesting stat. That's a very interesting stat.
Big change, big difference.
Yeah. Okay. Carrie, what do you think?
The struggle that I see, especially for newer users or companies that are just implementing Business Central, is kind of related to what Cynthia said, but they just don't know which reporting tool to use. Cynthia made reference to some of the reporting tools in Business Central, but we have financial reports. We have standard system reports with Excel layouts and RDLC layouts. We have custom report layouts. We have analysis views. We have analysis mode. And then outside of Business Central, we have the Power Platform. We have these other reporting tools and extensions like FYIsoft. So I often get asked the question by management, what reporting tool should I be using? And unfortunately, there's no single correct answer for that because it depends on the size of your company, the resources your company has. It depends on what you're looking for. Can we report on this in Business Central? Is it something that's better fit in Power BI? So there's just a lot involved that goes into that decision for reporting. And I think that's oftentimes something that companies just aren't prepared for when they're adding in this Business Central software. So they're just often looking for direction on which way should I go.
So Carrie, it's interesting you bring up about the Power BI. We also have that Power BI connector, right, in Business Central to report packages that are in Power BI provided by the BC team.
Right.
So it's just, yeah, you're right, Carrie. It is just so hard to figure out even where to start.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I'm going to throw it out a place that people might want to start. I'm going to color outside the lines a little bit. This came up in our pre-call. I hope you're not going to get mad at me for bringing this up. But a lot of people will tend to default to something based in Excel. Written in Excel. They'll either do it in Excel. They'll pull the data out in Excel. Why shouldn't we do that? Why is that a bad thing to do?
If I can give my quick thoughts here, I would say that I don't necessarily have anything against Excel because some people do consume information better in that format. But at the same time, I think whatever is in Excel as far as data, it needs to be able to be dynamically updated. So we can't have this static data sitting in this Excel spreadsheet because things change. So even if we have the best controls on our posting dates, I think for me, it's that I really want the data linked to Business Central in some way so that we don't have this static data just sitting there in Excel.
So just following on that a little bit, and then I want to come back to Stephanie and Cynthia on that comment. Is that a good place to start then as we're evaluating reporting? Should we start by figuring out what's Excel based and what is truly dynamic and linking back? Is that a good place to start for organizations? Because I think a lot of people really rely on Excel.
I think that's definitely a part of the conversation, part of a bigger conversation.
Okay. Stephanie, what do you think?
Yeah, I think for me, I do think it's a good place to start. I work with a lot of companies that have been managing inventory or their costing via spreadsheet. And I think for me, the problem with Excel is data integrity. You don't have that comfort level that the data is controlled, that it's not always accurate. And so then you have trust in reporting problems. And when you don't have that trust, nobody trusts anybody else. And then the conflict starts to begin, and it's absolutely horrible. So I think that's the real challenge with using Excel as your sole reporting tool. I am an Excel crazy person, so I am never going to say bad things about it, but there are the right uses and the bad uses, right? So it's got to be managed properly.
And I even think some of the reporting tools we have that are Excel based, we need to take a good hard look at, because if all we're doing is augmenting with Excel, when we think, to your point, we need a different tool, like the comments going on here about your cooking appliances. I'll tell you, I'm not going to put a carefully hand kneaded piece, loaf of bread into my blender to mix it up. Okay, they're just like, even with a paddle, I'm not doing it, right? So I think we have to be careful about where some of these tools end up, and I think looking really closely at what they're doing. Cynthia, what's your take on Excel-based reporting?
Well, let me use two examples here. I'm have the privilege of working with a lot of companies on reporting, and I got this really complex report from one organization. And it was in Excel, and I opened it up and I got an error about circular references.
Okay.
and they run their business by this report. So I was kind of like, I
Right.
can't even open it up without getting an immediate error, if you would, that there's a problem here. I think so. That's one thing. And then the other thing that was interesting, and I haven't heard this recently, but I was doing some work with a client that had full audits that were done on their organization. And we came up with an idea for a report, and we were going to use export to Excel for it. And they said, no, we have to have it printed. This is going to the auditor. Our auditor will not accept a report in Excel because we can change it. And I had never heard that before. But I think it was because we were transitioning from everything was printed to, we can get it in Excel, so can we do whatever we want with it? Well, in our world, in operations or running our business, that's great. We can put, modifiers in there and do different scenarios. But an auditor, no, they want something that's black and white and real. I haven't heard that recently, but I think it all goes back to you have to have faith in the source of that information. You can't have circular references, and you have to know that whatever's in Excel has not been modified if that's the case.
I think that's a great point. I think that's an absolute great point. And I guess, I think when I think back to some of the accounting tools and the accounting products I've used in past lives.
Lotus 123.
Okay, yeah, I'm old. Yeah, I'll take that one. I'll take the hit on that one. But the reason why you weren't always extracting things is because you could extract something and manipulate the data. And I think that's an interesting point. And I think we're gonna get to that topic too when we hit AI, because there's some real interesting things I think we've all seen when it comes to AI. So here we are. Where does AI fit into ERP reporting? Does it fit in? Can we trust it? What are we doing with it? Stephanie, you kick this off.
This is a fun one, because I when I'm thinking about AI, I think about how can we use this to make ourselves more productive? How can we help speed things along? And I think today, as we look at AI, it can do a lot of really good things. It can analyze loads and loads of data and give us amazing insights. I think what we have to remember, though, it can present the data, it can give us some insights, but at the end of the day, the humans still need to make those decisions and understand what they need to do from those insights. And I think using AI as an assistant to help us with our reporting is not a bad thing, but there's all the caveats that we have to worry about. The data integrity, is what it's really giving us real, because how many times does it give us bad information? So I think we're just scratching the surface at where we can go. Eventually, I see AI as being able to help us more in that advisory role of analyzing and presenting options and potential for forecasting and looking out and seeing where we could go. But today, we got to be a little wary.
Yeah, forecasting is an interesting concept, as long as we know that the assumptions we might be making are plus or minus 10%, right? Like we have to be careful on how we do that. Cynthia, I know you had some pretty good observations about this, and I think you might have even had a use case that you wanted to share around this, but what do you feel about this topic?
Well, it's interesting. Since we last talked, I could come up with like 4 more use cases, so I'm not even sure which ones I shared before.
Fire away.
Yeah, so I'm currently working with a client on a GL account consolidation, and I actually used AI, and I chose to use ChatGPT for this, and I was able to make a recommendation that came out in spreadsheet form with multiple worksheets, taking it from just the P&L accounts from 229 accounts down to 66, and the use of dimensions. And all of the recommendations were made by AI. Now, it also didn't give me a mapping, but I said, could you please give me a mapping from the old accounts to the new accounts? And it did. But here's one of the things you've got to watch. Each time you do an iterative request, sometimes, even though you say, I want you to change this one thing, it makes a change somewhere else. So you always have to like check all of your work. The other thing that I've noticed is that I'm comparing different AI tools. And I think, Marie, this is one of the things we were talking about. So I am now running things in Copilot, which is more knowledgeable of the newest and freshest documentation provided by Microsoft for some reason, just by the nature of the large language model that it's using, even though it uses ChatGPT 5, by the way, now, as part of its tool. But what's cool about that is it has a tendency to bring out the information in kind of a dry textbooky kind of way. And that's not me. I think you can tell I'm not, So I will take that dry textbook information out of Copilot and I'll put it into ChatGPT and ask it to give me a plain English explanation that the AP person can understand, the controller can, and I can be specific, and I get a different result. So it's not all about using one AI tool. It's not all about, like Stephanie said, trusting it 100%, or Marie, your fudge factor. And you can't assume that it doesn't make changes that you didn't ask it to do. So it's still learning. I also found out, I did some research in using AI. It does not learn from us. I thought it did. But what it does do is it keeps track of all of your conversations, right? If you're saving your chats, and it learns from that. So I now don't have to say I'm using Business Central. It knows that. It didn't learn that. It sees it in my prior chats.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting point because I think we're all still learning about where some of these tools are going and how they actually function. We've been using ChatGPT in our organization for over 2 years now. And to your point, I thought it was learning from the world, but it's really only learning on our data. And it's learning the way that we work and our methodology that we've baked into it and a whole bunch of other things that we've done with it. But I think every month we learn something new about what it does or doesn't do.
Yeah.
And I just know that as a business owner, I don't want it messing around with my numbers. Like I don't want it, even if I build a projection or I look out, and we're in the process of we're right in the budget cycle here at Marketing Copilot and trying to figure out, is there a way you could create a budget using AI? It needs to go back through all that data to figure out, well, what have you spent on this in years past? How are you going to do budgeting? And I think budgeting is a very, very, especially if you've got a big company with lots of moving parts, it's a very complex thing. But just running a budget in AI, I don't think is a good thing to do. I don't think it's useful. I think it's fraught with problems. Carrie, what's your feeling on this?
I think in what's just been said, there's a really important thing that we haven't specifically called out is that reporting can be two things. It can be historical, what's happened in the past, and it can be forecasting or budgeting out into the future. So I do think AI can fit in where maybe previously if I was sending my financials to management, I would look through and I would say, the margin is low on this month's salaries expense was pretty high. Instead of me going through and calling out those things, I find an opportunity for AI to call those things to my attention so that maybe I can even look into them and make sure that they're right for reporting. So it can take some of that work away, I think, of identifying those things. Maybe it can even say, oh, it was higher because you hired this new person and this other person was training them. But I still want to verify that information, as you said. And then I think if we look into forecasting into the future, I think it can maybe call attention to things like your product margin is really high on this one product. Maybe you should start pushing this, or your inventory levels are really high on this slow moving product. Maybe you want to run like a campaign or sale on it. So I think taking that historical data to identify opportunities in the future, but not just letting it control what that future reporting or budgeting looks like. So I think that's, for me, where I see it fits in, is taking some of that manual work out of what I used to do to relay that information to management.
Can I add one thing there too?
Yeah.
And yes, Carrie, I'm jumping in after you again. She's made an excellent point about, looking at the data. And when I was talking about the two tools that I'm using, the ChatGPT and the Copilot, That's the other thing Copilot is really good at. Copilot is the one for incorporating your data into whatever it is you're doing with your AI requests. So I just wanted to clarify that. And that is where it's really good. It can do exactly what, Carrie was saying, but that's Copilot, not just ChatGPT.
Well, I'm already got a million ideas. I'm already jumping all over it. Stephanie, what do you want to kind of put some icing on the cake here?
Sure. I think it does go back to Carrie's point, and certainly everything we're talking about here comes down to two things. We've got to use AI the way that it makes sense to use AI. And that's as that assistant, right? That's helping us. But at the end of the day, the human still has to make those decisions. So supporting what we're trying to do and what we're looking at, I think is critical. And then the other piece is just really trust in the data. If the data's bad, it doesn't matter how good or bad the AI tool is going to be. It's going to fail. We're going to fail, right? So those are the pieces where I just really think we've got to focus. How can it help us? But is our data right?
And I think it's fair to say and fair to kind of call it out that as you're moving forward with your ERP, whether you're putting in a new system, upgrading, trying to augment what you already have, I think it's fair to say that you want to ensure that your data structure and even the data structure and the reporting tools you're bringing in can be used against AI. And sometimes this is a very difficult thing to analyze. It's very difficult because we're all in this big learning curve right now. It's hard to analyze, do I have the right data structure that I need, either within my system or within my reporting tool, to be able to do some of these things. And I think, there's a couple of ways of looking at AI that a lot of people have done. One is, can AI fix manual processes? And I think that's the low-hanging fruit. That's where a lot of people have gone right out the gate. And, I was recently talking to an accountant who was doing accounts receivable for a municipality. And they had the wherewithal to automate some manual tasks that were going on when people were going in and checking numbers in spreadsheets. And they figured out a way to immediately be pulling the numbers in order to be able to say, this is where it came from, and now I don't need to go back and forth, and saving huge hours of time by automating these manual processes. We need to move from there, though, to how do we use this to become even more competitive in our business? And I think that conversation around being forward-thinking, modeling things. But wouldn't you agree that we have to have a structure within the data that is accessible to AI? I don't know how else to say it. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in here and talk about that. But wouldn't you agree that that's a consideration as we're looking at reporting going forward? Anybody want to take that?
I will say that I don't think the requirement is any different than if it weren't AI.
Right.
Okay.
You still, it still has to make sense. We've changed the building materials we use for foundations of homes, but no matter what the building material is that we use, it has to support the weight above it. Right. So I look at it the same way. If you don't have the proper foundation laid, I don't care what house you build on top, it's going to come crumbling down.
All right.
We've spent
Stephanie.
That's really good. Yeah, I was just going to say really quickly, we've spent a lot of time over the years talking to people about going from unstructured data to structured data. That's still the case. We need data to have structure so we as humans or AI knows what to do with it.
Yeah. Carrie? Any thoughts?
To add to Cynthia's house reference, I would say we absolutely need to start with the foundation, but I don't just start building a house without thinking about what I might want it to look like in the end. So I think so many times we start putting data into the system without thinking about what do we want to report on? What are we wanting to get out of this? So we need to make sure that we're keeping that in mind and making sure that we're building the data or the foundation so that our house ends up looking like we want it to. And I think that's just something important to keep, is keeping in mind that end goal and that end result. And oftentimes management might be saying, oh, I want to see this and this, but the question back to them would be, what are you wanting to get out of it? Because we just want to make sure we're designing it in the right way for what they're thinking.
I mean, that's a great point that I've always questioned when I've seen a lot of IT projects. Somebody wants to go out and build the foundation for a 10,000 square foot house, but they're building a 1,200 square foot bungalow on top of it. It's like, what are we doing here?
Exactly.
Maybe we add some stuff down the road, but there's got to be a different way, and that's probably why Agile was born and a whole bunch of other things to help people understand how they can do sprints. But I have to believe in today's world, data is a full-time job. Data doesn't ever go away. It is the underpinning of everything we could possibly want to do. And I think thinking about the goal of structured data just from the outset is probably a smart thing to do, because we know that structured data is what's going to give us more of those golden opportunities and golden moments within a business.
You just made me think of something else too. If we think of, so one of the things that was like an aha moment for me in Excel was XLOOKUP, so that I could have a list of things on one worksheet and a list on others, and I could find out what the differences were, right? So to me, AI is those special formulas that we use in Excel. It just adds that much more power. So it will, I think, give people a better opportunity to, for example, use more dimensions to do greater slicing and dicing of data.
Right.
Because now we have like the AI formula to make that slicing and dicing easier. As a human being, don't have to think through all of those. And that's one of the things that I'm using it for right now, because it actually called out to me some dependencies between some dimensions that I was proposing that I kind of thought of, but it was like, it just put it right in black and white for me. And I was amazed, because I'm like, how does it know that?
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you get very amazed. So we're coming into the last 15 minutes of our session today. And if anybody has questions, please put them in the chat bot. If there's anything specific you want one of these incredible experts to cover. But what should finance leaders watch for as we move to a new generation of reporting tools? What is one of the two things that really stick out in your head? Carrie, let's kick it off with you.
For me, I think I would say keeping in mind that end goal of what you want. You don't necessarily always need to feel like you need the latest and greatest. If you are using Standard Business Central right now and it works for you, great. If you think you need more, consider those other options. But I think even for me, I don't use Power BI or, additional reporting tools for my business, but at the same time, what I have is enough. So I think it's just about figuring out what that end goal is, even as your business changes, and figuring out what the best solution is.
Stephanie, what do you think?
Yeah, I think kind of along those lines, we're going to see more and more integration between ERP, AI, data sources, all of these things. And as there becomes more and more of this, I think it will be important to take a step back and go, is this something I need, or is it noise? And just making sure that you're staying focused on what you need to drive forward. I also think roles start to shift a little bit. We stop being so much task oriented and get much more strategic, because again, we as humans need to be the ones making those decisions. So that's kind of where I see the path forward.
Cynthia, what do you think?
Well, I think the phrase is what, trust and verify or something like that. Well, right now we're not quite at the trust. So I think we have to verify and then trust. So that's one thing, just be cautious. And the other thing, this isn't really as a reporting tool, but it's as a sounding board. When we have reporting that we're doing and we think it's falling short and we know why it's falling short, don't forget, we can use AI. We can give AI that report. We can attach that file, like put it in Excel, attach it, and say, here's the reporting I'm looking for. Do you have any recommendations based on this structure? So it's not just about this repetitive output, but it's also what's possible. So, use it as, I'm trying to come up with a name for mine. I figured a lot of people probably already call her, as I said, her Chatty. So I have to come up with something else. I was thinking of Kathy, Chatty Kathy.
That's what I call mine.
Oh, well, then it can't be Kathy for me. All right. But my point is, you can have conversations with this, right? With these tools. And again, it's not a magic pill, but it is another resource that we have available.
I think you're absolutely right. I call it the Chad. Give it to the Chad.
You've got Hilda in here too.
Okay. All right. I love that. But yeah, I think that is a very smart way of looking at it. And I also think, finance has never been my strong suit. It's not the part of it. The only real time I got involved in finance is when the CFO was always trying to cut my budget. That's when times get tough, right? When the marketing person has to go hat in hand and beg for their budget. And I remember even during my times of looking at reporting around financial information in order to be doing budgeting or whatever, there's also the problem of the complexity of the business, multi-entity mergers and acquisitions that take place. There's just, I remember one CFO who had to onboard a new company that had been acquired when I was working in the mobile industry. And I pitied them. They had to show up at somebody's office and move like 25 bankers' boxes of paper information that had been stored in order to figure out where are the books really at? Where's the data really at? Now, mind you, this was quite a while ago, but the point is, as things get more and more complex in a business, it gets riskier and riskier, and it gets harder and harder to do reporting. And I think this is why you need experts like these amazing women on the panel today who have rolled up their sleeves and dug in many different projects to really understand what is the reporting requirement. And I think it's admirable that we have people like you in the channel that we can call in to basically answer some pretty tough questions. And I know I was sort of asking you to predict the future here, but I think you've all made really good points about data, starting with what you want the end goal to be. But let's face it, change is a constant today. Change is the thing that we can't avoid. And even in our own businesses, like I said, there might be a merger that happens halfway through the year. We might completely restructure our employee infrastructure. There just seems to be so many things that we have to see. Chris's comment that there's just so much scattershot of data. Moving away from a legacy system to BC is a really good time to review. And I couldn't agree with you more. Because I think there's a lot of people who ran GP and did things a certain way because we had to augment a lot of what was going on GP. As we're moving to Business Central, it's starting to incorporate more of the things that had to be augmented. But at the same time, I think it's a good starting point to be able to say, what do I really need? How do I really need to make this work? And I don't envy the CFO. I don't envy the accounting team. I don't envy the people responsible for financial reporting. It is not easy. And I have a renewed respect for those people that I probably didn't have when I was working full time and had to go negotiate with the CFO. Now I understand. And even, as we talked about trying to predict the future in a business about where things are going, it's a hard job. It's a very hard job. And I think we could all use a little help. And I think that's why getting reporting right and really understanding good reporting tools like FYIsoft is really important. If you're ready to fix ERP reporting for good, this is the public service announcement part of the webinar today. FYIsoft has a download for you. You can snap that QR code, and they've written a guide called How to Evaluate Management Reporting for BC and GP 5 essential considerations. So this amazing panel was able to give you a few tips and tricks, but here's another guide that we can use that we can start to think about what we have to do if we're looking at Business Central or GP with respect to what do we need to do for Management Reporter. But we'll get this report out to you, and there's some good stuff in there. And, you know, we invite you to comment on it. Give us your feedback. If you think they aren't the 5 essential considerations and there's other ones we've missed, we'd love to hear from you. Today, I want to thank very much our panelists, Carrie, Stephanie, Cynthia. When I first came to Stephanie and I asked Stephanie to put, to consider putting this kind of panel together, she immediately knew how to pick up the phone and ask the right people. And I think you can tell from today's session that these people are invaluable leaders in the channel right now for helping people get things right. You can connect with all of us on LinkedIn, but we also have put up our email addresses there if you want to reach out to any of us directly. We do encourage you to connect with us on LinkedIn. It's always a good place to connect and talk and get some really great advice from people who are on both sides of this equation, both IT and accounting and finance. And I think that's a great place to start if you're looking for resources, because you need to see both sides of it. And the thing I love the most about people like Cynthia and Stephanie as an example, and Carrie, is this is an extra set of eyes who see things that you don't see as a business leader or as a business owner. And that's why it's really great to bring in outside help. Not to mention the fact that they're seeing, problems across many organizations and might be able to give you an idea that you hadn't thought of before. And this is where the human element of today's world becomes so important. While AI is great for providing content, it doesn't always provide context. And it's that context experience, learning how to do something. I can't just show up and become an accountant because I have an AI tool. I have to understand the context. Yes, I know. Isn't that shocking, Cynthia? I can't do it. I cannot do that. And when people say to me, I remember I used to work in the accounting profession and in Canada, and I remember people used to say to me, well, people coming out of school today, they're just going to Google things and look it up. Yeah, well, let's see how well that works out for them in the long run, all right?
Well, wait, if it's on the internet, it's true, right?
Oh, it must be true. I read it online. It must be true. So thanks, everyone who joined us today. We really appreciate it. Please reach out by email if you want to connect on anything. And we hope you found this useful. And if you are a Microsoft partner or an ISV who was on the call today and you are interested in being on the hot seat, I'm going to put you in the hot seat. Please reach out, and you're going to get asked some tough questions, because this panel today can attest to the fact that we dug into these questions, and we wanted to make sure we brought you some really great content, and I think we absolutely delivered. So thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm going to give you 5 minutes back in your day so you can grab a coffee before your next meeting. Take care. Have a great day. And thanks for being in the hot seat.